Welcome to Arcades, the Strategist. Hope you're excited to get some defenders going. But before we jump into the video, this is brought to you by mtgotraders.com. And also, 100% before we jump into Arcades, I was trying to think about what sort of wall we would build with Arcades, and I just kept thinking about the wall from Game of Thrones. So if you notice in the overlay in the background, that's what we got going on. So let's take a closer look at Arcades. We have one colorless mana, green, white, and the blue, flying and vigilance. Whenever a creature with defender enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. Then each creature you control defender assigns combat damage equal to its toughness rather than its power and can attack as though it did not have defender. Now, what are we doing with this deck? It's pretty self-explanatory. We're running a ton of defenders in here. We want to be able to cash in a ton of card draw. Now, Arcades is one of those decks to where it's not going to do well with Arcades not on the battlefield. So you're definitely going to run some sort of protection with Arcades, and in fact, you definitely want to hold on to some of your walls before you start casting them to get Arcades down first to really kind of start cashing in some of that card draw. But outside of that, running a ton of defenders and also running a lot of cheap enter the battlefield effects, stuff like Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, that's going to allow us to bounce all of our defenders and put them back onto the battlefield to cash in some really good card draw for usually only around 3 mana. Let's go and take a look at some of the walls or the defenders that we are running in this deck that really helps us kind of push our game plan. So we have some good mana walls in. We have stuff like Gatecreeper Vine that's going to allow us to search up a land. Axebane Guardian is going to allow us, it actually kind of combos off with another card, which I will definitely kind of cover in the rest of the deck tech later on. Then also stuff like Wall of Roots, we can put that -0, -1 counter on there to add some green mana to our mana pool. And the stuff like Sylvan and Overgrown Battlement, that's also going to allow us to tap out for a pretty good chunk of mana once we get a ton of those defenders on the battlefield. Outside of mana defenders, we also have some good utility defenders that kind of provide a unique take to the deck. We have stuff like Bonded Fetch, draw a card, then discard a card, and it actually works out pretty well that it does have haste. You may notice in one of my videos that made a little bit of a difference, the fact that it did have haste. Drift of Phantasms, enter the battlefield, it's flying 0/5, which is always nice to have a defender with flying, but it does have that transmute ability, so we're going to be able to pay 3 mana to transmute this card, and actually it's going to fit perfectly with the combo that we are running in here with Axebane Guardian and Wall of Kelp. Also running stuff like Geist of Archives, it's going to allow you to kind of start scrying at the top part of your library at the beginning of your upkeep. This is definitely one of those decks that is kind of like Unesh. You want to make sure you have a defender to cast to really get that card draw going, make sure your hand doesn't stay stagnant. And so having something like Geist of Archives is definitely really good. There's also stuff like Wall of Junks. Whenever it blocks, return it to its owner's hand at the end of combat. So it's going to allow us to basically for 2 mana to really kind of start cashing in some of that card draw. And of course, we would be complete without a Defender Lord. Other creatures you control with Defender get +0/+2. For 2 mana, that is a huge effect to get down on the battlefield. Most of the time, if you're especially in 1 versus 1 commander, it's going to push the game in your favor, simply getting down Shield Bearers. Outside of the utility defenders, we also have some really good enter the battlefield walls. We have stuff like Wall of Omens and Wall of Blossoms. That's also going to kind of stack on top of Arcades' ability to we're going to be able to draw 2 cards. And then also something like Mnemonic Wall that's going to turn our graveyard online for bringing back instant or sorceries back to our hand. Congregation of Dawn is in the deck, and it's a wonderful card for the deck. So something like Congregation at Dawn in the graveyard, it's going to allow us to bring that back with Wall, or something like Swords of Plowshare. Just kind of keep us open. Kind of the Snapcaster Wall for the deck, which is always nice to have. Now, outside of the walls, this is just a kind of quick covering of some of the defenders that we do have in here. Just wanted to highlight a few of them. Let's move on to some of the ways that we can really take advantage of the enter the battlefield effects. Stuff like Eerie Interlude, Ghostly Flicker, and Ghostway, they're going to have a really cheap cost and a really high impact on your game. Like I mentioned earlier, with Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, this can exile your entire board state once they come back onto the battlefield. Let's say that we have 5 defenders on the battlefield and Arcades. We go for Ghostway. They're all going to enter the battlefield again. That's going to be 5 card draw for only 3 mana. And at the same time with Ghostway, it's going to allow you to kind of protect your board state. Let's say your opponent's going to tap out for something like Damnation. Ghostway is going to allow us to kind of go from there. And then also Ghostly Flicker. It allows us to protect some of our artifacts. In fact, we have one of our Scry lands in one of our games. So we go for a wall and a Scry land with Ghostly Flicker to kind of set up a really nice little turn. So it's pretty open as far as whatever you want to do with some of these enter the battlefield triggers, but they're really strong with Arcades on the battlefield. Now, another way that we can really take advantage of this deck is running some really good utility cards in here. These are some of the all-stars that work really well in my playtesting. Panharmonicon, it's always nice to get that double card draw. And then Venser, it's almost like he was made for this deck. So you're going to have that +2 exile target permanent you own, and then we get to return it back to the battlefield. It's always nice to have the enter the battlefield effect, but But that -1 ability, creatures are unblockable this turn. Typically, most of the time by you get down Vincer, you have a ton of defenders on the battlefield. Simply going for that -1 to make your creatures unblockable is more than enough to help you close the game out. You know, when you're looking at walls that are 0-3, 0-4, 0-5, you get down the Tribal Lord wall and give them all +0/+2. You know, that -1 will definitely win you some games. And then also something like Meekstone. Creatures with power 3 or greater don't untap during their controller's untap step. Arcades is definitely going to dodge Meekstone since it kind of has that pseudo vigilance effect. So it's also going to allow your creature's opponents to kind of stay tapped down, allowing you to start swinging and past that. And then also something like Aura Shards to really take advantage of. We're getting a ton of creatures on the battlefield, and we definitely want to make sure our opponent's artifacts and enchantments stay off the battlefield. And then Congregation at Dawn is an absolute all-star in this deck. You go for that, put the top three whatever defender cards you want to put on top. You can actually sequence it to where we have the there's a defender that has 0 converted mana cost, so you can actually sequence it to where you put the 2 that you need on top, put that 0 on top, and you kind of start drawing into some of those defenders. Or if you want to grab your combo with Congregation at Dawn, it is completely open, but it's actually a really good card for the deck. Some of the high impact enchantments that really help us kind of push our gameplay, and is also some stuff like Assault Formation and Rolling Stones. This deck is really dependent on Arcades being on the battlefield. So if we can't keep Arcades on the battlefield, we still definitely want to be able to swing in with a lot of our defenders, so an Assault Formation and Rolling Stone is going to make sure that's going to happen. And then also Crossroads for 1 green mana. We don't have to slam it down as quickly as possible, but you get into this point where you have Arcades on the battlefield, you're churning through your deck. Next thing you know, you slap down Crossroads and all your creatures have haste, and you're swinging in for a ton of damage. So it's definitely a really good card to run in the deck, and actually works really well with all the defenders that we do have. Now, as far as some power and toughness bonuses that we can run in here that really help us out in combat, stuff like Tower Defense, creatures you control get +0/+5 and gain reach until end of turn. Typically, that's going to be a 2 mana win the game if your opponent doesn't offer up any blocks, especially if it doesn't look like it's going to be that much damage. Stuff like Mizium Skin, that's going to allow us to protect our creatures, but at the same time, we can overload it for 1 mana, giving everybody +0/+1. So, really good card, and actually works out really well to where it can protect them and give them a really nice power and toughness bonus. And then Lure actually works out really good in this deck. All creatures able to block enchanted creature do so. So, long story short, you get a ton of walls on the battlefield, put Lure onto one of your smallest walls, and next thing you know, all of your walls are swinging across, and Lure pretty does have unfortunately, I didn't really get a really good Lure win in one of our gameplay videos, but it is really good for the deck. It really kind of makes it to where you can swing into some of these complicated board states. Now, as far as some of the good utility creatures in here, we're also looking at stuff like Prophet of Krufix. This is 1 versus 1 commander where Prophet of Krufix is unbanned. So if you see this card on here wondering why, I'm playing 1 versus 1 commander. So it definitely kind of helps us with this game plan. Brago is going to allow us to get some really nice into the battlefield triggers. And then stuff like Sadar and Tetsuko, it's really going to allow us to help us out during that combat step. And of course, if we get down Axebane Guardian, we have a ton of mana. Getting down something like Crater Hoop to give all of our walls trample and +X/+X is always a lot of fun. Another good thing about the deck is you get to run some kind of one-sided board wipe. So you've got some stuff like Slaughter the Strong. Each player chooses any number of creatures with a total power 4 or less. So basically, you'll be able to keep Arcades and all of your walls, and your opponent's going to have to sacrifice all the way down to at least 4 power or less. There's also Dust to Dawn, destroy all creature power 3 or greater. And then that Aftermath out of the graveyard, it's going to allow us to bring all of our creatures back to our hand if something does happen to them. And then also something like Fail the Mighty, destroy all creatures with power greater than target creature's power. Choose one of your 0 creature walls. Most of the time, you're probably going to have to pick Arcades, but if you need to, you can go for that one. Choose one of your 0 walls to kind of blow the creatures up. Now, let's talk about some of the strategies within the deck. This is a couple in here that I want to highlight. It's always a lot of fun. This is going to be the combo. So we have Wall of Kelp. It has a double blue activation. Put a 0/1 blue wall plant creature token with Defender onto the battlefield. So if you're keeping score at home, we have Arcades on the battlefield. Get that plant wall token. That's going to be an additional card draw. Now, if we have Intruder Alarm on the battlefield, our creatures don't untap during the untap step, but whenever a creature enters the battlefield, untap all creatures. So let's say that we have Axebane Guardian, Wall of Kelp down. We add 2 mana to our mana pool, and then we tap down Wall of Kelp with that double blue. That creature enters the battlefield. Intruder Alarm triggers, untap Axebane Guardian, Wall of Kelp, rinse and repeat. So long story short, you're going to be able to draw your deck out, basically kind of generate infinite mana, because every time you make another plant token, that's going to be more mana for Axebane Guardian, and then you can pretty much just go to town on whatever you want to. It's kind of like the hipster version of Splinter Twin, except you have Wall of Kelp, which is just I don't know, I love it. This is why I love Magic. You get to combo off with Wall of Kelp. It's always a lot of fun. Then another really good interaction in the deck that I definitely want to highlight is going to be something like Eerie Interlude and a Mnemonic Wall. So whenever it enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So basically, it kind of puts you in a spot where you can almost kind of fog out your opponent's combat steps. Let's say they swing in, you declare your blockers, you go for Eerie Interlude. It's going to exile all your creatures. They're going to enter the battlefield again, and they're going to be able to bring Eerie Interlude back to your hand. So basically, it's going to allow you to kind of fog out a lot of these combat steps by declaring some of your creatures blockers. Now, if they do have trample, they will be able to push past on that, but if your opponent's creatures don't have trample, that will definitely allow you to kind of go for some really nice fog effects, or just bring back something really nice like Congregation at Dawn. So it's always nice to have something that kind of interacts with your graveyard, especially in a deck that's not really geared towards having graveyard interactions. But that is going to be it for the deck tech. I have 3 gameplay videos up for you right now if you want to go check them out, and I just absolutely love Arcades. If you're thinking about building Arcades, I highly suggest building it. It's really interactive and a lot of fun, and it's definitely a commander-centric deck. You need to have Arcades on the battlefield for it to perform really well, but it is a lot of fun if you're thinking about building it for it. Definitely go for it. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Thanks. Bye.